everyone, and welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Phil.
And I'm Pat.
And today we're going to keep talking about outstanding pieces of kit that we've owned. In particular, we're going to talk about our oldest piece of kit as well as what we consider our best piece of kit.
And I think in this episode, we're going to try to talk a little more about our gear rather than our weapons payload. Our last episode focused a fair bit on, rifles that we liked and didn't like and other, tools of war that we'd thought were really cool or really fun to, field. This episode, we're going to talk a little bit more about bits of non-weapon equipment.
Yeah, that's right. We really wanted to focus on the stuff that we're either wearing or carrying that is supporting us in playing airsoft, but not necessarily our primary tool. We're also going to be excluding our iPro as well as our magazines and ammunition, because that's not really what we want to focus on. We really want to talk about stuff you can pick up at a tactical store or at an army surplus store or what have you. We're going to start off by talking about our oldest piece of kit. So it's worth noting before we get into it, I've been playing airsoft since 2006. So it's been, 14 years at the date of this recording. Pat joined me playing airsoft in 2008. And so some of the pieces of kit that we're going to be talking about span almost that entire duration. In particular, for me, the oldest piece of kit that I still own is a single point Lone Star Spec Ops sling. It's a real steel rifle sling that I bought from a tactical store out west in Canada and Alberta somewhere. And I bought it in 2008, at the start of 2008, to use with my new G&G Scar Light. That sling served me until this year. I used it for almost the entire duration, every single game, because of course, we always recommend playing a game with a sling. I would never ever play a game without one. It's a critical piece of how I operate on the field.
They're too useful for a whole bunch of purposes not to carry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you ever want to transition to a sidearm and you don't have a sling, you can forget it, right? But so I had the single point sling and I used it every single game that I played from the moment that I bought it until the moment I retired it this season.
I also owned one of these. Phil, I'm pretty sure, actually bought it for me for Christmas that year. And I used it for every rifle I've owned up until my current one. So up until 3 years ago, I used it. It held up under the Mark 46. It held up to the 203. It's taken every kind of abuse either of us could throw at it.
And the sling in particular was great for a number of different reasons. Firstly, it wasn't super thin in terms of the width of the material, so when you put it on, it didn't dig into your skin or anything like that. It used a clip to actually clip into your rifle. And it wasn't like one of those quick detached mounts or anything like that. It was actually just like a buckle. And the buckle was plastic. And you think, oh, well, plastic buckle is probably going to break. This thing never broke. It was just it's made of rock solid plastic. I mean, I've rolled down hills accidentally. I've fallen into holes accidentally. The thing is a beast. It just will not give up.
It has taken every abuse we could throw at it on the field, and honestly, it's probably been chewed on by Phil's dog, too.
Yeah, oh my god, definitely. This is sort of what you get when you buy real steel quality, sort of real world, not knockoff airsoft kit, is you often will get pieces of equipment that will just be ruggedized in such a way that they're meant to take the abuses of a real world soldier, and consequently, when you use it in airsoft, you're never going to put it through the same amount of abuse that a real soldier would, and it's going to last you a really long time. So at the time, I might have paid $40 or $50 for that sling. Well, I mean, it's paid for itself, many, many, many times over. And if one day it does decide to die, it will have earned its seat at the hallowed table of Gear Halla.
Absolutely. I mean, I have, to my to my horror at the time, I've watched Phil fall down a lengthy hill with that gun, the Scar, attached to that sling, and gone, well, Phil, the sling and the Scar are all gone, goodbye forever, and had him get up, dust himself off, walk back up the hill, and resume shooting with no ill effect, right? And they're sterling. They're just excellent pieces of kit, and I mean, if the two of us can't break it, it can't be broke.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So what about you? I'm trying to think, Pat and I have known each other for as long as we've known anybody. And I'm just trying to rack my brain as to what might be the oldest piece of kit that you own.
So I think the oldest piece of kit that I'm still using in my like recurring cycle of stuff is actually probably my Black Hawk combat boots, which have been worn to up until this year when I switched to wearing hiking boots some of the time when I play. They've been worn to every game of Airsoft I've played since 2010.
Yeah, I remember those boots were recommended to us by Cal's dad, who had served many tours overseas, and those were the boots that he wore, and therefore we figured if they were good enough for him, they were probably good enough for us, right?
Yeah, I think he came back from Afghanistan and was like, I couldn't wear these out in 3 months in Afghanistan, so they'll probably stand you guys in good stead.
Yeah,
and we're like, that is pretty much all the recommendation we need. They definitely have had some drawbacks for me in terms of their arid environment, desert boots, and I live in Newfoundland, so I play in sort of, forest and swamp. But they're indestructible. They've prevented more broken ankles than I care to think about. They've prevented more rolled ankles than I care to think about. They're fantastic boots. I really wish when we bought them, they made a waterproof, like, northern environment set that they don't currently make anymore. And I really wish I'd bought some then, because then I'd have 2 pairs of indestructible boots. But yeah, I can't kill them. I've worn them running. I've worn them hiking a bunch outside of Airsoft. They're my go-to. I am going walking somewhere where I don't want to break an ankle boots.
Yeah, and I know I had to replace mine because they were damaged through no fault of the boot. Some corrosive material was spilled on them accidentally, and they were just destroyed. So when we say that something is indestructible, we obviously mean, in the context of a game. Like we said, the Lone Star Slings are indestructible, but you can still cut it if you wanted to, using a knife. But that's not really what we're talking about.
Yeah,
right?
if you decide you want to destroy it, I'm sure you can. But like if 10, 14 years of game use every week or every second week for most of the year, in all sorts of conditions, doesn't beat it up, we feel that we can say unreservedly, this is a tough piece of kit. Those boots have been into holes with rebar in them and saved me from having my leg gouged open. I'm reasonably sure they've punched through a wooden board at one point because of rot in the board that I was walking on. They've been worn in mud, rain, snow, ice, whatever you can think of, and they have never failed me.
Yeah, and we talked in a previous episode about how important it is to have proper footwear, like not just, boots and socks and stuff like that, but if you're going to be going out and spending a couple $100s on a pair of boots, you want to make sure that you are getting the sort of quality that's going to last you for a really long time. And, we're not sponsored by Blackhawk to talk about their boots, but they have served us very well. I myself moved on from the Blackhawks and I'm using Magnums now. Same sort of idea. The purpose of me spending a lot of money on them is that, for lack of better phrasing, buy once, cry once, right? So you spend enough money at the time to make sure you don't have to spend it multiple times over. If you're spending $50 every year to buy a pair of boots, you could have just spent $200 one year and not have to replace it for like 5 or 6 years, and that's a better value.
And you'll get something a lot more comfortable than the $50, US or Canadian, wherever you are, surplus combat boot, right? I wore surplus combat boots my first 2 years playing Airsoft. And God was I glad to get rid of them and get the Blackhawk ones. They're really much more comfortable. And at the end of the day, as we talked about a few episodes ago, not being in pain the last few games of the day and therefore actually still being able to run is really a huge benefit.
So we're talking about our oldest pieces of kit, and for me, it's that Spec Ops Lone Star Sling. I used it from, as I was saying, from about 2008 to 2020. But I've actually recently just retired it, and I'm now using a 2-point sling. I'm using a Ferro Concept Slingster. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because for me to be able to take a piece of kit I've been using for 12 years and replace it with something else, it would have to be something that is very, very good, right? That makes me a lot more effective on the field, or is much easier to use, or is not holding me back. And in point of fact, the Slingster that I'm using now, I would say is probably one of the best pieces of kit that I own.
I know I have one as well. I bought it when I switched to the current rifle that I'm using because I wanted to have the ability to switch between sort of a 1-point and a 2-point sling on the fly, and it's very good for that. And man, they're excellent. It is comfortable. It allows me all kinds of mobility and all kinds of options in terms of slinging my rifle, in terms of manipulating my rifle while I'm fighting. They're great. And the Lone Star Slings were fantastic. The only reason I think that we both switched was that we wanted the ability to switch to a 2-point. For me, it was largely because my rifle is quite long, and on the 1-point sling, it sort of dragged along the ground a little when I wasn't holding it, and that's very undesirable. So I wanted the 2-point so that I could sling it more effectively in terms of having it out of the way and strapped to me without risk to the gun or inconvenience.
For sure. I mean, with the 1-point sling, what I found, especially moving into my a little bit longer gun, which I have now, my G&P Mott's M4, if I go to transition with a 1-point sling, it's dangling basically in my center. And so in order for me to be able to do that effectively, I actually need to clear it before I draw my secondary, right, for example. Compared to the 2-point sling, where as soon as you drop it, it just sort of stays right where it is. So you get a tremendous amount of stability and repeatability in your steps. You don't have to clear it. As soon as you drop it, you can start doing other stuff. And as you were saying, you can also sling it on your back. You can do a whole lot of stuff. Real steel shooters, I mean, you look at Grand Thumb on YouTube, he talks about the Slingster, and it's one of the ones that he uses. There's a lot of good reason to be using a Slingster. It's a very, very effective piece of kit. And for airsoft, especially if you're using a bit of a longer rifle, having a 2-point sling that you have clipped into the back of your receiver as well as to the front of your rail gives you a lot more flexibility. It gives you a lot more stability, and transitioning shoulders becomes really easy. And fundamentally, the Ferro, the way that they manage the variable length on the 2-point is just phenomenal. It's very easy to use, right?
It's brilliant. Like, just outstanding. I also think it's worth noting the Slingsters, like, they're great with a variety of weights of weapon. They're really, really strong, tough pieces of gear. And, you know, for me, I often end up poking at people's guns that they've broken on the field. And if it's, you know, a minor thing that can be fixed without taking it off the field, great. And so for me, the ability to strap my gun and toss it on my back and absolutely have my hands free and be sure my gun isn't going anywhere is tremendous value.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, my best piece of kit is absolutely my Tactical Tailor MAV. It's a version 1, so it opens on the back rather than on the front, but I'm quite sure the version 2 ones are absolutely fabulous. For those who haven't encountered them before, my MAV is my chest rig. So it is essentially a MOLLE cummerbund with, you know, shoulder straps and a back strap. It is super lightweight. It's incredibly comfortable. It allows me to carry my mags. It allows me to carry my multi-tool, my first aid kit, all on me in comfort all day long without any issues. It's very, very durable. I've taken a couple of rough tumbles in it, and it is completely immaculate. You can wash paintball paint out of it, which is useful when the airsoft field and the paintball field have some overlap. Just, it's a wonderful, wonderful piece of equipment. And it's sort of also the culmination of all the kits that I've tried running over time, and of me going, all right, what would I change about my kit if I were going to change stuff, right? So there was a point where I was talking to the team and we were sitting down talking about, you know, what we're using and why. The MAV for me is basically, you know, I know how many mags I want to carry on my vest. It fits them. I know I want to strap my multi-tool to my vest. I don't really want to carry it in my pocket or in my on my belt. It's not as useful there. I want a little admin pouch, and it's just everything that I need fits on it. And I'm the sort of person who has the temptation to fill excess space, right? If I have more MOLLE, I'm probably going to find things that I shouldn't put on my vest to put on my vest.
Yeah, for sure.
So the fact that it doesn't have more is great. It is expandable. I can buy a little sort of like bib that will insert on top of it if I really do need more space at some point. But I don't foresee that really being a thing. It's MOLLE, so I can swap pouches in and out if I want to switch to different loadouts. It's just excellent. And it does everything I want it to with absolutely no drawbacks for me as a player.
So when we were getting ready for this episode, one of the standout pieces of kit for me, and it wasn't necessarily the best kit, but it's definitely like a runner-up, would be the tactical belt that I wear. And it's the same belt that I know John and Chris wear for sure, and some other guys on the team as well. It's the 511 Tactical Sierra Bravo Duty Belt. And what's important to note about this belt is that it has both an inner belt and the outer rigid duty belt. So the inner belt is just basically like a Velcro, reinforced nylon Velcro belt that holds your pants up. But it has Velcro loops on the outside so that the Velcro hooks on the inside of the duty belt can actually just mate perfectly into it. And this is wonderful for a variety of reasons. So number one, if you're wearing suspenders, like some of us do, you can loop the suspenders right into the inner belt and it holds your pants up. Great.
And you look really fashionable.
And you look really fashionable. But number two, by virtue of the fact that it actually clips over your inner belt, you can put it on and you can take it off at any time without having to take your pants off, which is a huge benefit, because that means that if you're in a rest area, you're in your safe zone or whatever, and you just want to cool off for a bit, you can just clip off your belt, and off comes your holster, your dump pouch, your mag pouch, your grenade, like anything you have on your belt, like your first aid kit, whatever. It just all comes off, right?
Relative to my situation, it is definitely much better. It's definitely top on my list of things I need for my non-historical kit. Probably at the moment I'm too hyped about World War II stuff to buy modern practical things that are good and useful. So I'm going to go buy another pouch for my Grand Mags, but yeah.
But yeah, this duty belt is a really great piece of kit. And up until I was using this belt, I never had any sort of duty belt set up like that before. I had a shooter's belt from Eagle Industries, and I'd clip my paddle holster into it, and that was okay. But again, if I wanted to take my holster off, I had to take off my belt, and therefore my pants wouldn't stay up because they were suspended on my person, right? So there's a tremendous advantage of having this sort of belt that can just clip on and off, and you can remove it, right? So it's a really excellent piece of kit to have.
Plus, if you have to run to the washroom, you're not dumping all of your gear on the floor of the often dubious facilities at airsoft fields.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
So, another piece of kit that I carry, and that I've been carrying for about 7 years now, that I think of as extremely useful to my airsoft kit, but that's not, I guess, a core part of the airsoft experience, if you will, is I carry a Leatherman MultiTool. Because the number of screws that fall out of airsoft guns that need to be put back into them over the course of an airsoft season is, it's not a thing I think about. I just end up doing it, really quick on the field, takes 6 seconds, no problem. But it's genuinely saved a lot of time and a lot of people having to go home because their gun broke or their gun fell apart or their gun was jammed. And just, hey, I need a pair of pliers, I've got them. I need a pair of scissors, I've got those. I've got a knife, I've got 18 screwdrivers because I have a bit set for it. And it's one of those things that you wouldn't necessarily think is core or critical to airsoft. And maybe the fact that I'm a gun tech and that I, am willing to put people's motors back into their guns and put the contacts back on them in the middle of an airsoft game means that it's more useful to me than it would be to some people. But lots and lots of airsoft players I know carry some sort of knife to airsoft. A startling number of us, myself included, often carry, a combat knife because it looks cool. But as a practical tool for airsoft use, you probably don't need a K-bar that often.
But you definitely need a multi-tool. No question.
Yeah, it gets used to adjust everyone's sights, because every single player on my team's optic uses either a Phillips or a hex key to adjust. When it wasn't on my kit, it'd be like, I guess we're going to use our car keys. And it's just, hey, having, we are tool-using primates. Having a tool is definitely a positive.
Yeah, or adjusting the motor height. I know, last game, my motor height was off, and it's here, pop the multi-tool, screw in the motor a bit, and then, off you go, right?
And because I carry it on my vest, right, it spent a while in my pack, and I eventually did just buy a molly pouch for it. Leatherman makes them, which is great. And it lives on my vest next to my mags, so that if I need to adjust the motor height on my gun, or Phil needs to adjust the motor height on his gun, or we need to tweak a sight in the middle of a game while we're shooting at people, it's just, here you go, no problem. It is a super useful piece of kit. People who like multi-tools will talk about Leathermans and Gerbers, and there are all sorts of options. I'm barely equipped to discuss. I like my Leatherman, largely because it has all the features that I want it to have. I think I'd probably be fine with the equivalent Gerber, and it's indestructible. I have dropped it in holes, I have dropped it down concrete stairs, and to all intents and purposes, it cannot be broken. It's fantastic.
And I know Chris carries one too, so it's an important thing to have on your person.
Yeah, I think when I got the molly pouch, he saw it and was like, that's an idea, and went and bought one as well. And that's one thing that is probably worth mentioning in terms of talking about kit for our team, is we absolutely cross-pollinate ideas. I bought the MAV because I wanted to get rid of my 6094 because it was uncomfortable, as we addressed in a previous episode. But I bought that specific vest because Karoo had bought one for something for work and loaned it to me for a game after I sold the 6094, but before I bought something to replace it, because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to replace it. And I wore it for a game and went home and bought one. Literally just what is this? Where can I get it? And I have zero regrets about that. If it ever breaks, and I don't think it can really, but like if something ever happens to it, I will immediately buy another one.
And I mean, same thing for me. Like me using a slingster on my longer rifle is as a result of using your slingster pattern, using Chris's slingster, and sort of getting accustomed to it. And as I said before, I had used that single point Lone Star for 12 years or however long it was. That's a lot of untraining or retraining that needed to happen as a result of using a new piece of kit, and it's still ongoing, really. But if you're listening to this, like, that should tell you how good of a piece of kit it is, that I was willing to try this new thing out and then liked it so much that I was willing to retrain 12 years of learned muscle memory from using a single point to become proficient with the 2-point slingster, right?
That's one of the things that I guess we haven't really addressed with this. We've changed our gear up a bunch over time. Every time I've changed my vest, I've had to relearn where my pockets were, right? My mag pouches end up being in a slightly different place. They end up being in a slightly different arrangement. My radio was on my vest for ages. It lives on my primary line now because, again, I bought the MAV and I was like, well, I don't really want to put the radio on this. It's not one of the things I budgeted space for on this. It's gone. Mm-hmm. And honestly, having it where it is now is actually much better in terms of like access and in terms of use. For ages, I had an M-Biter style radio. It was a reproduction. It was not a great radio, but it looked really cool. And when I ran my Cyraz, that lived on the back of my Cyraz. When I ran my 6094, it lived on the back of my 6094, which was a dumb idea, right? It got it out of my way, and it meant that it wasn't using real estate that I wanted for mags or for other things that probably I should have been putting the radio in, but it meant that I had to get Phil to change my radio frequency if we were changing radio frequency in a game.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is useless.
And that neatly ties into sort of the overarching concept that we often push when we're talking about gear and stuff like that. These are the best pieces of gear. These are the oldest pieces of gear that we've had. We've talked about some garbage pieces of gear we've had in the past. But fundamentally, a piece of gear is only going to be as good as you are at using it, right? So you can have a slingster, which is a great 2-point sling. You can have an MAV, which is a great chest rig. You can have really great reproduction optics. You can have a really good radio setup. You can have a whole bunch of great gear. But if you don't set it up for yourself, if you don't practice with it, if you don't get accustomed to how it works on your person, how you are going to interact with it, how you're going to use it during the game, then it's not doing anything for you, or it's not doing as much as it could if you actually spent the time learning how to use it.
Absolutely. I mean, like, you can go buy a real steel EOTech if you have $500 or $1,000, but it's not going to do anything for you if you don't then go practice ready-ups with it and quick transitions with your sight so that you're actually using it correctly. It's also going to do nothing for you if you mount it badly.
Or don't zero it.
Yeah, exactly. There's a learning curve. There's a learning curve to any piece of equipment that you acquire for airsoft, or I guess anything else really. And airsofters often have a tendency to go, I don't know if I really want to practice with my stuff. I just want to go play games. And so a lot of our favorite pieces of gear are our favorite pieces of gear because we've had them for a long time and they work really well. And we've sort of lived in them for long periods. But we're also the kind of player who will load their vest up with mags, take the rifle, put on an episode of Band of Brothers, and just reload their rifle and drop mags on a foam mat so we don't disturb the girlfriend for an hour.
Yeah, and some people have commented on our videos in the past and saying, you don't need to practice, just play games and that's good enough. Well, sure, I mean, you can certainly play games and that's good. But imagine if you played those games but you also practiced. Like, you get a lot of benefit from learning how to utilize your gear so that the first time you're becoming familiar with a piece of kit is not while you have the stress of other people shooting at you, right? One good example that I give is scuba diving. So if you've done any scuba courses, if you've got your open water license, something like that, something I've done myself, the first thing you learn about is how to manage yourself and your equipment. So you learn how to manage your buoyancy and your air and all this kind of stuff. And then once you become proficient in managing all of that stuff, that's when they encourage you to start looking outwards. That's when you can start learning how to dive on reefs, or how to take pictures, or how to do a cinematography underwater, or wildlife identification. You learn to do all of that stuff that's in your environment after you learn how to manage your own kit. And the same thing is true in airsoft. You need to understand how all of your own stuff works before you can start really focusing on what's going on outside. And that's what our training really focuses on, is this idea of building the muscle memory, getting familiar with our kit, so that when we play a game, we're focused on our environments. And to loop this back to what we're talking about, the best pieces of kit, the ones that have lasted the longest, are the ones where we've been able to do that and directly correlate that piece of kit to how effective we are able to be on the field, right?
So to briefly talk to a debate in airsoft and in real steel shooting that I don't care about because I find it silly. So you get people talking about the beer can grip or the index grip, how you pull your mags out, right? And I think of Musashi in his book of 5 Rings talking about, how do you walk when you're fighting? Well, however you'd walk normally. So you want to figure out which of those you should be using? Do a reload. Whichever one you just did, that's the correct one. But in practical terms, now that I know that, all right, cool, I have 12 mags on my vest, or 6 mags on my vest, 8 mags on my vest, whatever you're carrying. I run 8. Okay, I'm going to do that a whole bunch. I'm going to pull from every single mag pouch on my vest and reload my rifle, because the less time I have when I'm reloading, the more likely I am to either, be able to shoot people who I'm targeting, or, and I feel that this is more important for me, continue putting fire downrange to suppress so that my team can do whatever they're doing, right? So I don't care as much that my slow reload is going to give people an opportunity to shoot at me. I care that it gives people an opportunity to shoot at my teammates, right? And the practicality to me is, yeah, I'm going to practice because I do not want that window to be any wider than it has to be. Likewise, I'm going to switch vests if my vest doesn't work, right? I want to be able to fight as long as possible, as comfortably as possible, and play as hard as I can without my gear getting in the way of those things. So if I have a piece of kit like the MAV, like the Slingster, that enables me to do that better, fantastic, right? And at least once a season, I do sit down and put my entire kit, lay out my entire kit and look at it and go, what is working, what isn't, what do I need to move around or get rid of or add? Right now, it absolutely is. I need one of those belts because the belt I'm using is not great. Right? That's probably my least favorite piece of my current kit, so it's the next thing to go. Next year, I could look at it and go, I don't really like the mag pouch, the type of mag pouch I'm running for my primary line M4 mag. Or maybe I'll look at it and go, man, I used my pistol a lot more last season. Maybe I need a second, spare pistol mag. Something like that. But it's that mindset of critically assessing your kit without romanticizing it, without looking at it and going, man, I've had this forever and I love it. Because even though Phil loved the Lone Star, and even though it served both of us really, really well, the practical elements of it just didn't work out in the way we're currently playing and in our current approach.
So hopefully you've taken something out of this discussion, and hopefully it has encouraged you to look at your kit and try and see, which of the pieces of kit that you have are the best, which ones are the ones you like the most, and also take a critical look at the pieces of kit that maybe not doing what you need them to do on the airsoft field.
Also, remember that if you have friends who you play with, or if you have teammates you play with, talk to them about your kit. Talk to them about what they think of what you're using and how you're using it and what you're doing. Because, they might go, hey, have you considered tying this down a little better? They might look at you and go, Pat, why do you have a 10-pound M203 launcher on your gun anyway, right? And if you have friends or teammates who are comfortable enough with you to tell you, I know you love this piece of kit, and I know you think it's really effective, but every time I see you use that sling, it fouls you, and you get shot because you were trying to shoulder transition and you couldn't, listen to that, right? Get advice, get help from your friends, work together to improve one another.
And let us know in the comments if you have any questions about the kind of gear that we're using.
Or if you have any suggestions for us for pieces of kit you think we would benefit from trying or checking out. We're happy to look into new pieces of gear. Obviously, there's room for us to grow as well.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.
Have a good one.